So this automatically get to
got a notification we are streaming.
the channel. Go here.
Yeah, I need to go start up the channel.
Then we'll wait till
YouTube and everything. Are we on YouTube tonight?
Yep. We just started this, so we're streaming on YouTube now.
Great.
Waiting to get the TV channels brought online. We'll go ahead and start right at 6.
We're also recording, council members, so we're hoping that we can replay this or have it available to anyone that wants to see the recording.
Must see TV.
You bet.
You're live on cable.
Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody so I can get started here. One minute and counting. Okay, I've got 6 o'clock. So I'd like to welcome everybody. This is the public meeting for the Porter Avenue corridor projects. It's 2 projects that were part of the 2019 bond issue that was voted on last April, I believe. And the first one of those to get started is the Porter and Acres intersection project. And then we're also going to talk about the initial conceptual design tonight for the Porter Avenue streetscape that will follow sometime next year. So if you're here for any other reason, that's all we're really going to talk about tonight. So we won't be discussing any other items of concern with the city tonight other than those 2 projects. So we're going to have here shortly a presentation by our design engineer to kind of give an overview of the projects and where we're at with them. And then afterwards, we'll have a question and answer session if you have questions about the projects in general. And we'll tell you how to do that. We've got several different ways you can send those questions in to us. We'll cover that at the beginning of the presentation so you can be formulating your questions while we give it. Hopefully, we do a good presentation and it'll cover most of those questions, but we realize, people always have something else that they want to know. So we're here to help and get your input tonight. I just want to go around and introduce everybody on the Zoom call here. We have Sean O'Leary, who's our Public Works Director. Myself, I'm Paul DeAndre. I'm Capital Projects Engineer and the Project Manager for these 2 projects. Brett Cavanis is our design consultant. Then we want to welcome our other city officials. Thank you, Council Members Hall and Holman for being here tonight. They've been very involved in this project and helping us plan it. And Scott Sturts, our city engineer, and Daryl Pyle, the city manager, is also on the call. So with that, I think Councilmember Hall wants to say a few words to get us started, and you're on.
All right. I just want to say good evening to everybody, and I'm really glad that all of you could join us tonight. This is a project that's been a long time in the making, and the whole reimagining of the Porter Corridor is something, as a Ward 4 council member, that I'm really excited about. So I want to thank all the city staff for making this virtual meeting possible. It was originally planned last March and COVID got in the way. So I'm really grateful that we were able to take this time tonight to learn about the project. So looking forward to hearing all of your feedback and your questions, and just glad that you could be a part of this meeting tonight. So thank you all.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Holman, did you have anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, thank you. I just would echo those same things Councilmember Hall mentioned. This is a long time in the making. It goes back to at least Ward 4 Councilmember Carol Dillingham, maybe even back to when Cindy Rosenthal was the Ward 4 council member as well. And so a very long time. It took almost a decade after the Porter Corridor Plan was created and adopted for it to be put on a bond election for voters to approve or not. And thankfully, Norman voters went to the polls and said yes. So we're finally going to be able to improve the aesthetic and function of this vital corridor through the middle of our city. It's really an extension of downtown. And so I'm really excited to be here, and I'm ready to get started and ready to get it underway. So thank you all.
Thank you, Councilmember Holman. Brett, you want to go ahead and share your screen there, and I can go over the ways they can send in their questions tonight.
Sure. Give me just a second here. All right. Talk about that, Paul, or do you want me to?
I'll go ahead and run it. We put up here on the screen, we have 3 ways that you can submit questions at the end of the presentation. In person, I don't see anybody here in person, so everybody's properly social distancing. That's nice. We do have, if anybody walks in though, we do have some comment cards, and they can fill those out and turn them in to Jason here on my left, and we'll collect questions that way. We also, and this is actually our preferred method because it's just a little easier for us to track, make sure we get everything addressed. If you would send into my email address, that's it there on the screen. We'll leave that up here for a little bit so people can write it down. My name's a little long, but that's our preferred method to get it. And then finally, you can also post questions to the YouTube live chat window. Do not post the questions to the comments section. No one is monitoring that. Your question won't get to us. So please, if you have a question and you want to submit it through YouTube, use the live chat window. And that's pretty much it. Those are your 3 options for tonight. I would also ask, just out of courtesy, that this is meant to be kind of an overview of the project. We don't want to get way down in the weeds in this meeting, and being respectful of everyone's time tonight. If you do have a specific question that pertains maybe to you or your house or your business along Porter, and you want to ask something about that, but it's really just isolated to that area or something, or a very specific question, go ahead and take my email address down and send me an email tomorrow or next week. I'll be happy to meet with you one-on-one on that. But tonight, we want to try to keep it just kind of general overall project type questions tonight. So with that, I will pass it off to Brett, and he's going to give us kind of a rundown of the projects and where they're at.
All right, thank you, Paul. We'll also put this screen up at the end of the presentation. So if you didn't get Paul's email address written down, we'll have it up at the very end of the presentation as well. So let's talk a little bit about the corridor history of the project. As Councilmember Holman suggested, this project's been in the making for well over a decade. There was a conceptual report done by the auctioneer company back in the early or the late 2000s. And then in September 2010, the council adopted that corridor study. A few years later, the city contracted with Cabinets Engineering, our firm, and to look at specifically some intersection improvement concepts at the intersection of Porter and Acres. From that, we prepared a conceptual design report, submitted that to council for their approval. It kind of sat on the shelf for a while because there really was no funding mechanism in mind at that point in time. Then in July of 2017, the council approved a contract amendment with our company based on the concepts that were selected and approved for the intersection improvements in July 2017. And then as the council member suggested, the transportation bond election was in April of 2019. These two projects, the Porter Avenue and Acres intersection project and the Porter Avenue Streetscape projects, are two of the first 3 or 4 projects in that bond election that are going to be designed and constructed. So quick history, we talked a little bit about the Ochsner report. It really sparked a corridor-wide debate on how we could improve Porter Corridor through the middle of our city. It really kind of looked at several different goals for the corridor and for Porter, you know, streetscape, access management, roadway design, intersection design, things of that nature. It had a lot of great input, a lot of great thoughts, a lot of good public comments that were kind of funneled down into what the Ochsner report was. Now, the only problem with the report that we saw was the report was really conceptual at that time. It really had no engineering data to support some of its design concepts, although they were very important design concepts and they were good thought-provoking things. So with that, we were hired, as I mentioned, in 2013 to do a conceptual study, mainly to focus on the intersection improvements at Porter and Acres. We took the concepts that the Ochsner report had, we finalized them into 3 concepts for city council consideration. And those concepts looked like this. And the first, you know, we were very creative in our naming of the concepts: design option 1, design option 2, and design option 3. So we were very creative. But really, design option number 1 looked at focusing on intersection improvements, pedestrian safety improvements at the intersection, and potential having left turn lanes off of Porter Avenue onto Acre Street. So that meant a 5th lane in that. Let me turn that off. Sorry about that. The first concept, design option number 1, basically designed everything around the existing center line of the street. If you walk out in the middle of the intersection, that's the center line of the street. Everything was symmetrical around that line. We looked at having a cul-de-sac placed at Dawes to limit access to Porter Avenue. That is a safety improvement for traveling public as well as the pedestrian participants that walk up and down Porter. And that cul-de-sac looked a little different between option number 1 and option number 2. Now, option number 2 is very similar to option number 1, with the one caveat is we slightly adjusted the center line alignment to the west. And the reason we did that is option number 1 had us impacting at least 3 businesses, potentially 4 businesses with that design option. Option number 2 reduced that number down to only taking of 2 businesses that would be impacted by the roadway improvements. So we thought this would be a potential better option, but we also looked at the roundabout option that was put forth by the Ochsner report. And if you look at that concept, you see that the overall footprint is relatively large. And that concept impacted 6 different businesses that would be basically have to be taken in order to make the footprint work and function normally. Now, those options and the details that surrounded those were put forth to the city council for approval. The option number 2 was approved by city council in July of 2017. It had the least impact to the businesses that we talked about earlier. It would only impact 2 businesses. It still accomplished the overall goal of traffic safety and pedestrian safety, and being able to, have pedestrians walk from the west side to the east side of Porter Avenue. If you're familiar with this area, east of Porter Avenue is the Longfellow Middle School. West of there is the new library. So there is a lot of pedestrian traffic there, and there's no way to protect those folks. So with a traffic signal, we were going to be able to protect them and give them a very easy path back and forth across. The project improvements with design option 2 also improve street lights, drainage improvements, and then obviously safer sidewalks. Now, where this does tie into the overall auctioneer report and the overall corridor improvement for Porter is we're going to use the enhancements that are developed with the concepts for the Streetscape project. We're going to incorporate those into this design as well for this intersection improvements. That basically means improved traffic signal lights, improved street lights and pedestrian lights, sidewalks that are wider, that are improved with color, stamps, and staining as well. So it gives it a very new, clean, and fresh look at the intersection. And it will also dovetail in well, if not exactly, with the overall improvement to the entire corridor. Since that concept design, we've had one slight modification to design option 2, and that was basically the modification to the cul-de-sac at Dawes. We wanted to, again, try to eliminate the impacts to businesses in this. And so we've came up with a different concept for the cul-de-sac. We actually moved it a little bit farther to the west of where we had proposed it earlier. And the benefits of that is we saved on acquiring the need to acquire another business. And that was important to us. We could improve the parking through there. We could also reduce the opportunity for somebody to try to make a cut through from Dawes back to Porter. By moving it back farther west, it gives the impression when somebody comes down Dawes that they have no way to get to Porter Avenue. If we had the cul-de-sac up adjacent to Porter, that would give the impression that somebody driving down there might be able to get to Porter Avenue. We don't want that. We don't want people cutting through the parking lots to get to Porter Avenue. But we also were able to improve the sidewalk in this area. So we have a sidewalk that will gain access. So pedestrians walking down Dawes does have access to Porter Avenue at this location. So where are we at now in the design stage? Well, we're in the final design stages. We're ready to submit the project for public bidding somewhere in the first week of August. The right-of-way, as we understand, is nearly complete. There are still a few parcels of property that we're negotiating on getting that taken care of. But all the private utility relocations have been taken care of. The water line that will be constructed with this project will be upgraded and improved in this area as well. And so the schedule for that is to have construction start somewhere around the fall of 2020. And we estimate that the construction will be completed by late spring 2021. Now, the estimated construction cost is a little over $2 million. And that's still in line with the original conceptual design project or budget that we established back in 2013. So right now, this was the top priority project on the 2019 transportation bond issue. Council said that they wanted this project done, and it is getting ready to go to bid and be under construction in the very near future. So that's kind of the intersection improvement project. Now we kind of start looking at the streetscape project. And again, we reference back to the auctioneer report because again, it had a lot of great concepts that we could draw inspiration from, or we could draw from, you know, some ideas that we wanted to make this corridor improved and bright and vibrant again. So where we're at right now is we've completed the topographical survey from essentially Robinson Street all the way down to Alameda. We started developing conceptual design themes. And when we start talking about themes, we're starting to talk about landscape themes. We're starting to talk about the sidewalk themes, the traffic and pedestrian light themes, what the poles are going to look like, and how we can also incorporate and dovetail those into the Main Street corridor improvements as well. We did have one preliminary meeting with the council, and that was back in early March of this year. And so we were ready to have the next meeting, and obviously COVID has kind of impacted that. So we're having that tonight. So once we get a little farther in the conceptual designs, I'm sure that we'll be coming back in detail with the council. But one thing that we also want to know, or want people to know, is the business owners and the property owners through there. As Paul alluded to earlier, if we need to come sit down and visit with you about a specific issue with your property, we're more than willing to do that. Again, we want this to be a vibrant corridor that is pedestrian friendly, it is walkable, it is still traffic friendly as well and safe. And so we want this to be a great overall improvement for the entire city of Norman to see. So again, this was actually the third priority of the city of Norman transportation bond issue, and it's progressing forward as well. So again, a little bit about the overall scope of the work. Basically, we will start at Robinson Street and work our way south. And if you see the aerial picture here, the yellow is kind of what we've deemed the north half of the project. And then at Alameda Street is kind of the south half of the project. And then you see the area in red, that's the Acres and Porter intersection improvement project. So you see how they will all tie together eventually. But what we want to do with the design is we want to reflect what's best about Norman, and that is pedestrian friendly, unique concepts and designs, well landscaped, well lit, just try to bring a vibrant vibe to this corridor again, as it was many, many years ago. Again, we want to improve pedestrian safety, we want to improve street lights, and we want to make sure that it is phased in construction with the Porter and Acres intersection improvement project as well. We will not do it all at one time. The intersection improvement project will go first, as we stated earlier, and then at the end of the completion of that, or near the completion of that, the Streetscape project will be kicking off at that time. So we do have a plan that they will be phased together. So some of the essentials that we want to look at as priorities for the streetscape, obviously trees and ground cover and irrigation, ADA compliant sidewalks, new curbs, the decorative street lights through there, and just envision the black poles with the LED lights that are very bright. That's the concept that we're looking at right now. We want to improve some signage for pedestrians crossing the street, make sure they have a safe avenue across. And then we want to start putting some of the customized things that we see into the design, such as the stamped concrete or the integrated colors of the concrete. We want to look at a covered bus shelter now that the public transit has a stop just outside Norman Regional Hospital. So we want to make sure that those things are customized specifically for this corridor. But I think one of the really cool things, and that we have a rendering, it will be the gateway entry walls and railings. That shows people, hey, you are entering the Porter corridor through this area right here. And so I think those will be really cool. And then if we have the budget to add some decorative screening, some more streetscape elements, potentially street furniture, and then banners on the signs as well. So this is kind of the priority list that our design team has come up with. The essentials and the customs are things that we're going to make sure that are get into the scope of the work. And then budgetary constraints may allow us to add some of these other amenities or extras to the project as well. So we talked a little bit about the sidewalks. The picture on the left, if you've walked down Main Street, you see the banding of the pavers between the curb and the sidewalk. We think that concept is still a good concept. It also adds a visual buffer between traffic and a pedestrian through there. But we wanted to do something a little bit different, more unique for the Porter corridor. So we're going to look at something of a stamped concrete in this area. And then we'll have a different color scheme that will be different than Main Street. But at the intersection of Main and Porter, we've got to be able to blend what started on Main Street and blend it in with what's going to be on Porter. So the two vertical slides here that you see is kind of the blending that we're going to look at. And if the third vertical is the dark gray stamped concrete, that's the look that we're going for on the Porter corridor. It's a little Art Deco-ish, going back to the Oshner report again. So this is the sidewalk detail that's been approved by staff. Again, we start looking at the normal colors of gray concrete, then you have the darker bands of the stained concrete. And then the other thing that we want to do is kind of a visual banding ever so often that will match up with the street lights that will go down, and you'll see a rendering here in just a second that will go down the street. So as you progress down Porter, you start seeing these bands or these visuals, and you start thinking of the speed potentially. And so hopefully this is a speed reducing visual impact that we want to add to Porter Avenue. Now, the other thing is we talked a little bit about trees and landscaping. We're going to use a structural soil underneath the sidewalk that will give a space for tree roots and shrubs to be able to utilize some of that space without breaking up the concrete. We've all seen the sidewalks adjacent to trees that have a massive root system and how they bubbled up and broken the concrete. Use of structural soil like this has been effective in other urbanized areas to minimize that degradation of our new sidewalk. So we talked about the speed checks, and this is a rendering, and you see in the photo there kind of the bubble where we have that integrated band that you will start driving down the street and you'll start seeing this almost like a milepost or something of that nature. So hopefully we get people to realize, hey, I'm going a little fast because I start to see these bands creep up at me closer and closer. So we think those will be very helpful. There are a few areas on some of the properties out front of the businesses that already have some landscaping that we do want to try to incorporate. And then others where we have just grass. This photo on the lower left is a great opportunity where we can add some additional trees through this area as well. And all of the trees and the plantings were going to be more of a natural Oklahoma look that are natural vegetation to our state. We've already kind of talked with the city arborist about some of these as well. And so we'll be putting together a schedule on what those look like later on with the design. So we talked about pedestrian crossings. We want to make sure that they're bright, they're light, visible folks that can see as we go across. We'll try to limit those locations predominantly to signalized intersections to where a pedestrian has a little more protection crossing to the street. But there are going to be probably some others through there that we'll need to make sure that we highlight. And there are some opportunities for some additional signage, things of that nature, to alert drivers that if there is a pedestrian crossing coming up. We talked a little bit about the gateways, and I'm really excited about these. Again, if we can use the corners of Robinson Street or the corner of Alameda, or potentially even at the intersection of Acres, to add these low walls with some decorative railings, I think that kind of gets back to looking at the cover of the auctioneer report, some of the concepts and design thoughts that they had. And so we're trying to draw those concepts and ideas out of that report that was done, almost a decade ago, and bring them to life on this corner as well. And so if you look at Alameda, this is another we're looking basically on the east side of Porter looking north. This would be the northeast corner where the thrift shop is currently located. And then on the west side of Porter, you see that we have some trees in that open space at the intersection. Again, we want to be a visible entryway into this corridor as we improve it through there. So we talked a little bit about the bus station or the bus stop across the street from the hospital. One of the things we think will be really a great addition, particularly as pedestrians start finding this corridor coming back to life, we see that the bus stop really needs to be enhanced, so where we can protect people that are coming to the hospital or to the clinics or anything of that nature for an appointment, they have a safe and secure location. So we want to put a bus stop at the corner at Johnson and Porter. Again, that's a priority for us. We also want to maybe put a bike repair station there. A lot of people now ride their bikes to the bus stops and then get on the bus to go across town. So we want to add that amenity in if the budget allows us for. So we do have some concepts and things that we want to continue to improve upon as we get farther into the design. So really the next steps as we kind of wind this down, the Porter and Acres intersection improvement project, the final public meeting is tonight, as we've talked about. The utility relocations have been completed and they're ready to go. The corridor is fairly clear except for the water line, which will be relocated with this construction project. We're working through the right-of-way acquisitions and easements. And then the plans are ready to be advertised in August 2020. Now that is obviously a little bit contingent on the final right-of-way and acquisitions being taken care of before that time. We want to open bids in August and then begin construction in fall of 2020, and then complete construction approximately about 9 months later, which would be late spring of 2021. The corridor, Streetscape corridor project, again, we talked about the March 17th meeting, and this is really the first kind of kickoff public meeting that we're having about the Streetscape project. But we want to push forward with our concepts and get to a preliminary design stage of about 65% complete by October of this year. That's a little aggressive, but we're going to try to push forward to that. That gives us plenty of time to address questions and talk through potential issues with property owners in this corridor. We don't anticipate that there will be any utility relocations other than the street lights. All down Porter Avenue will be moved and be improved, so they're not right next to the roadway and the footings, so my daughters don't run into them driving down Porter next to a truck. And then the final construction plans are going to be in March of 2021. We hope to have bids open in spring of 2021, right on the heels of completion of the intersection improvement project. And then hopefully construction of the streetscape will be summer of next year, and then completed, into the early or late winter of, that should read, 2022. Kind of got a little backwards there. But so hopefully in the next couple of years, this corridor will be bright, it'll be vibrant, it'll be pedestrian friendly, it'll be improved with for traffic, vehicular traffic through there. And I think it'll be a great project and potential jewel for Central Norman to make this area come springing back to life. So with that, again, we come back to the comments or the questions page, and we'll leave this up here as I get ready to turn this back to Paul. So again, if there's people in attendance, there are forms in the back that can be submitted to the moderator. The YouTube, use the live chat window. Please do not use the comment section, as we're not able to monitor that. And if you have a specific question, you can email Paul at his email address here at pauldeandra@normanok.gov. With that, Paul, I'm going to switch it back to you and be ready to answer some questions.
All right. Thanks, Brett. I've got a few in. I will, I guess we can kind of address these. We received a few while you were talking. We had one question from Stephen Swanson. He asked, will there be bike lanes? No, with this project, there are no bike lanes planned along Porter. That would require widening the roadway considerably, and that was really not part of the concept with this. The short answer is no, there's no bike lanes to be added at this time to Porter.
Let me dovetail in on that, Paul. You're absolutely correct. We are not adding bike lanes for this corridor. The reason being is if we were to add those, we would have to acquire some additional right-of-way. And as you know, there are some businesses that are very close to the existing right-of-way lines, and we don't want to have any more impact to those businesses. And so bike lanes were really never considered for this corridor.
All right. Then the second question from Mr. Swanson is, how will you facilitate traffic to businesses during construction? I believe we'll require that they keep lanes open. In general on Porter, I think we're going for at least one lane each direction at all times. We'll always have access to those businesses. It may be a gravel drive for a little while we get the pavement replaced there, but they will have access.
Absolutely. And we put those into the construction documents for the contractor, that we must maintain access to all businesses. I'll bet sometimes it may be a temporary for a short period of time while we pour back a new driveway for that business. We will put into the contract documents as well that the contractor has to coordinate with the businesses through there for deliveries. If they're coming and delivering food or supplies to a business and it's early in the morning, contractor has to make sure that access for that delivery has to be made. And so we do put that very heavy emphasis on access during construction. The contractor will prepare a detailed traffic control plan. And you alluded to, we will probably have traffic choked down to one lane in each direction during the intersection improvement project until it is complete. The good thing about the sidewalk project and the streetscape project is we'll put into the contract that the contractor has to sequence his work to where he can have a 1 lane drop per day during working hours, and then he will have to pick those back up. Now, that's just a concept. The contractor, again, has to have an approved traffic control plan that is approved by the city prior to them starting construction. But we do always try to put a heavy emphasis on access to properties, residents, and particularly businesses during construction.
Absolutely. And I'll just add, we also will have our inspectors out there during construction inspecting, make sure the contractor is following those traffic control plans. You'll be able to contact me or our inspector at any time should you own a business in the area and you're having an issue. Feel free to contact us and we'll try to accommodate it as best we can and as quickly as possible once construction starts. So if for some reason there's something we overlook and it ends up causing a problem, we'll get out there and try and remedy it as fast as we can. One more question here from the email. Says First Courthouse and Old Silk Stocking District have concerns about sight lines at Porter and Acres and cross traffic moving quickly. They want to see safe multimodal traffic. They also would like traffic calming aspects in the project. How does this project improve over what they currently have?
Well, the first biggest intersection improvement project will be a signalized traffic signal at the corner of Porter and Acres. Right now, it is not. You have a signal at Johnson, and then you have a signal at Gray. So we have another integrated signal that will be at that intersection. It will have pedestrian control as well that will stop traffic to allow traffic to cross the street, pedestrian traffic to cross the street. The sight lines, we've looked at those, and there unfortunately was one business at the corner of Porter and Acres that just was basically a dead sight triangle we could not make work, and so we had to take that business as part of the design with the intersection improvements. So we have improved the sight distance for Acres as it looks north and south on Porter. Likewise on the east side of Porter at Acres, those intersection sight distances have been reviewed and are within our design parameters. And again, we do also have a traffic signal there controlling traffic as well.
Yeah, and I would also add the lighting on the Streetscape project that's being added will be new LED lighting. It'll be brighter probably than what's there, which also helps with those kind of things. The fact that we're closing Dawes is eliminating one leg of that intersection. So there's fewer opportunities for pedestrians and vehicles to come into contact with each other at the intersection. And like Brett alluded to, the traffic signal there at Porter and Acres will also help accommodate that. Yes, see if I can get, doesn't want to unmute. I think Council Member Hall had something to add there. If I can get it to unmute her. I can't get it to unmute. Can you try it? You got it?
I did have a comment.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you were raising your hand. Sorry. Okay. Let's see. We had another question. Terry Reed asked, is there a stoplight being added to the Porter and Acres crossing or just a turn lane? It is a stoplight. As we just discussed, that's going to add a lot of safety to that intersection that's just not there now, especially for pedestrians making crossings. It'll have pedestrian signals and everything. So it will be able to stop traffic and let school kids get across and things, which right now there's just some flashers in the pavement on the crosswalk. It's not a very safe crossing for those kids. So that was a big push for that intersection project. A couple of questions coming in on the live feed. It says Porter is currently 4 narrow lanes. How many buildings will have to be removed to make it 5 lanes? Currently, the plan is not to make Porter 5-lane. The only place we'll have a 5th lane are the new left turn lanes at the intersection. And right now, the intersection project is almost completely done designed, and there was one building we had to remove, as Brett just discussed. So we're in the process of acquiring that property right now so it can be removed and got out of that sight line. But other than that, there will be we're not planning on removing any buildings for the project. Another question, what is the purpose of 5 lanes? How will 5 lanes impact walkability? Again, the 5 lanes is only in the immediate vicinity of the intersection where we're adding left turn lanes off of Porter. So it's just a very short distance there. So as far as the walkability in that area, we're adding the pedestrian signals and everything. It'll be a signalized intersection. So it will, the project will actually improve walkability for that location where we're widening it. Another question here, it says, will there be improvements made to acres between Porter and the library? If so, what is contemplated and what is the timeline? For now, I don't think there's any between Porter and the library. We just, do we not have a sidewalk project, Sean? You might, I think we have a sidewalk project going in there to connect that, but I'm not sure if when that's being done.
Sure, Paul, thank you. We did do some sidewalk gap improvements in there to make a continuous sidewalk from Porter to the Jones Ave intersection and then over to the James Garner intersection. We are just now moving into the second phase of James Garner, which is the new north-south road just east of the library building there. So those are the improvements that are currently budgeted and in the city's program. No other improvements on Acres Street between Porter and I guess Jones.
Okay. We have a comment here from Arva Osborne. It says, I have a special needs child that has a home pickup. Will the Dawes cul-de-sac be big enough for a full-size bus to turn in? Brett, I know you've looked at that. We custom designed that cul-de-sac to address just such things. So you can go ahead and address that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very good question. We did design the intersection or the cul-de-sac, excuse me, to accommodate buses as well as life safety, fire trucks, trash trucks to make a turn through there. There will not be any on-street parking permitted in the cul-de-sac to allow for this, but we did try to minimize the amount and size of that cul-de-sac to accommodate those types of vehicles making a turn around in that area.
Paul, if I can weigh in for a minute here, it's a great question and not quite directly to that particular question, but to the question of accessibility to our disability community. I'm going to put my city ADA coordinator hat on here for a minute and just say that, and I think you all have said it already, but accessibility to the entire corridor with sidewalks, crosswalks, that sort of thing is a #1 priority. In fact, it's a key element of what Cabinet is doing to redesign every driveway, every sidewalk, every ramp, every intersection. And so not only will we be accessible there on Dawes, but the entire mile of Porter will be fully accessible for the first time probably in our history here in Norman.
Yes.
Okay, we got just a comment here from Robert Campbell. It says, the corner gateways look like great places for concrete benches. From your graphic, it looks like you are almost there. So I thank you, Robert, for that. We'll take that in consideration as we finish those conceptual designs. And then we had another question came in from Kamala Jolly Stewart. How close are the turn lanes to the crosswalk? By ADA requirements, there's a 4-foot gap between the stop bar and the crosswalks. We will meet all the requirements of the American with Disabilities Act to stripe those crosswalks and keep them all the proper spacing. So they'll be just like every other signalized intersection across the nation, they'll meet those minimum requirements for spacing to keep having conflicts between cars and pedestrians. Looks like Tim's writing frantically over here. We got another comment in here. How wide will the sidewalks be? Brett, you want to address that?
That's a great question. Right now we have 6-foot wide sidewalks with a 2-foot buffer between the curb and the sidewalk. So overall, the sidewalk is proposed to be 8 feet wide. Now, there are a few instances where we've had to narrow that 8 foot down to 6 foot to kind of accommodate parking at existing businesses. But for the most part, the corridor will have 8 foot wide sidewalks on both sides from the back of curb and have that little 2 foot stained and stamped buffer between traffic and pedestrians.
A couple more coming in. Thank you. Sonny Owens asks, do you think the city will have to go in 20 years and add bike lanes? If so, wouldn't it make sense to change the number and orientation of lanes to accommodate them now?
Well, I would love to say that we could put bike lanes in here, but I go back to my earlier comment that in order to do that, we need a wider footprint for the roadway. And in order to do that, we would be impacting businesses. And that's not what we're in the business for. We want to make sure that we have a corridor that is pedestrian friendly, still moves vehicular traffic, but the narrowness of the existing right-of-way that we're constrained with, we just don't have the room to add bike lanes. Mr. O'Leary might have a little bit more information, but I believe there is a bike master plan, bike lane master plan study. Is that correct?
That's great. Brett, I was going to say that we have a bicycle advisory committee made up of some really hardworking citizens, and they think about bicycles in any form of bicycle transportation in Norman on a regular basis. They do a great job. I don't have that in front of me, but I know they've addressed the Porter corridor relative to bicycle usage. It is in the master plan that the council has adopted. I'd also say that the Porter corridor study recognized this very point. It's a great question to ask, but I think they recognize really what you said, Brett, and that is that in this particular case, we really can't fit them into this corridor without hurting our property owners and businesses, and they favored the benefits of the existing property owners and businesses over that transportation option.
There's actually been a question here. Someone asked if we could please go back to the slide showing quarters and acres.
Okay, someone has asked if we could please go back to the slide showing Porter and acres.
Okay.
Get that back up for a few minutes. Assume the plan view. Probably that one. We've got some other questions coming in here. Slide that down. I can probably look at it. Okay. Ty Hardiman says, are you saying that the future daily traffic count requires Porter to remain 4 and 5 narrow lanes? This seems like a traffic plan from 1960 instead of 2020.
Again, I think Larry's going to be able to attest to this a little bit more than me, but with the James Garner Avenue project, that is what is projected to take a lot of the traffic off of Porter Avenue for people going out of Norman or coming into the downtown area. Again, we recognize the Highland Dairy is going to be there, so we know we're going to have truck traffic as well. But again, we're constrained by the right-of-way on what we want to get accomplished.
Yeah, I will add to that, Brett, if I might. Again, that's exactly right. In the Porter corridor study, there was a very brief transportation analysis conducted really for this very point. There was a desire, the questioner is exactly right, there was a desire in the Porter Corridor study in 2010 to narrow the number of lanes. There was discussion about roundabouts here at Acres, and I think a roundabout perhaps at another location in the corridor. There was discussion of a 3-lane configuration. All of those things were really valid discussion points. But when we did the transportation analysis, my recollection is that the traffic volumes in this particular corridor ranged from somewhere about 17,000 cars a day to maybe 21 or 22,000. And it was determined that 3 lanes just could not accommodate that volume. And so what Brett said is exactly right. The hope is that we can someday have an alternative for this north-south traffic. We have very few north-south corridors in this area that can handle continuous connections across the city, which is exactly why the James Garner Avenue project was identified. And it also is funded, as Brett indicated, through the 2019 bond program. So perhaps someday, when there is less volume of traffic on Porter, we can revisit the lane configuration. There's nothing happening on this project, either the Acres intersection project or the corridor project, that would prevent the city or the city council from going to a lesser lane configuration in the future if they choose to do that, and if it's practical to do that. Again, the streetscape here is happening behind the curb. We're not doing anything with the street at all.
Yeah, we had another question, but I think you just answered it, Sean, about reducing the lanes. So is that, are there any other questions coming in? Oh, nope, there. Okay. Let me see. This, can we fit bike lanes into the plan if we change the number of car lanes or the orientation of car lanes? Can we stop giving full advantage to cars since future of our city is on foot? I think that's what we just addressed. All 3 of those questions, kind of the same concept. It's not something we have abandoned, but based on the current traffic volumes, we just, it's not part of the plan right now. Perhaps once we get the James Garner corridor done, that will take some of this north-south traffic going downtown off of this lane. We can address that at that time. But as Sean said, we're trying to design this. It will lend itself to a reduction in the future if that is possible, and that's something we can look at. But just right now, there's just too many cars that use it, and there's not another local path north and south to get down to downtown easily.
Paul, that's really well said. The only thing I want to add is that one of our concerns always in this situation is that if we did something to narrow or to reduce the capacity of a Porter Avenue in this case, we're very concerned that that traffic is going to make its way back into the neighborhoods, which is where we don't want more traffic. We want traffic to be on our major arterial roads like Porter. So that's the driver there. We don't want to negatively impact our neighborhoods or our areas where folks want to be quieter and live in residential settings. We want the traffic to be on the major corridors here like Porter. And until we find a place to put them, an alternative to put that traffic, as you said, we just can't make it happen at this time.
With that, I think I've got one more coming in. We'll answer this last one and call it. If you think of other questions after this, again, that's my email address here at the city. I am happy to respond to those individually anytime. Just feel free to send them to. Okay, we've got 2 more here that just came in, and we'll address those, and then that'll be it for the night. Another one from Kamala Jolly Stewart. Future daily traffic count is contingent on street design. We want less traffic and bike lanes. So. We got another one in from Terry Reed on computer. Can bike lanes be added to either east or west of Acres on one of the side streets?
I should have had our transportation engineer with us tonight.
Yeah.
I didn't expect this much interest in bike lanes. That's great. Again, happy to relay those questions to our Bicycle Advisory Committee and our staff that works on trails and bike lanes. I don't know the answer to that tonight, but we'll be happy to refer that to the folks who work with our bike path and bike lane program here in Norman.
Final question from Lauren Kennedy. What about curbs? My house faces Acres and none of the houses east of Crawford on either side of the Acres have curbs. There is excessive speeding and a large amount of traffic on Acres daily. I believe we're adding curbs in the vicinity of the intersection there on Acres. If I'm not mistaken, Mrs. Kennedy is one of the ones who had called or emailed me earlier this week. So the stoplight there at Acres, we hope will help with the speeding. Again, we have stop signs at all the intersections along there. But as far as the curbs go, they'll stop at the limits of our project, but we are adding curbs within the limits of this project. I think that's it. So I will say thank everybody for attending tonight. We appreciate all the input. We'll take these things into advisement, and hopefully we can incorporate the ones that we haven't incorporated. We can find ways to do that in the future. If there's anything, if Council Members Hall or Holman would like to have any comments, close. All right. Well, with that, again, thank you all for attending, and we will see you later. Thank you.